More and more people want to know how these nozzles perform at lower pressures. Well, this is a humidifier I put together. This is a small orifice nozzle on a fan, and it works very well. This is a 0.08 millimeter nozzle, and it's on a small oscillating fan, but it is high in the air. It is up about 6.5 feet. But the key to this is that it is running at 75 psi. So you can see it's putting out a pretty nice mist at 75 psi, and it does a great job of humidifying this medium-sized room that it's in. But the big question is how does this nozzle perform at lower pressures? Now, I have 75 psi at my house, and a lot of people have a little bit under 75 psi. Some people probably even down 50 or 40 psi. Well, this nozzle does have a spring check in it that is at an 80 psi spring check, but I've modified the spring in the nozzle a little bit to get it to work down to a little bit lower pressure. As you can see, it at 75 is working real well. But if we reduce the pressure, it does start to taper off, and that's what I'll demonstrate here in this video. Again, right now we're at 75, and I'm going to start to bring it down, and the next little clip I'll have it at 65. Alright, this is at 65 psi, and we're still getting a good mist. It's acceptable. But what happens as we get lower and lower on a pressure, the water molecules, or the mist itself, the droplets, become a little bit larger and larger, and that means they're heavier, and they travel to the ground quicker. Right now, this humidifier does a good job of misting the room and not getting any mist on the ground at all. But as the pressure becomes lower and the droplets become larger, they do start to hit the ground a bit. So I'll go down to 55 psi next. And this is at 55 psi. We're still getting a mist. I'll cut it down to 45 psi next. Alright, this is at 45 psi. And you can start to see the difference now. There's more of a stream coming out of the nozzle, and you can actually see that those water droplets are a bit larger. So, this really, this is not acceptable here at 45 psi. We'll go a little lower, and you'll see that it just actually turns into a stream. So you could say that, probably 60 psi is the safest operating point for this nozzle. And typically people do have 60 psi at their home, so this should work as a good small misting humidifier in a house. That should do it. Well, I'll go down a little lower yet, so hang on. Okay, here's 35 psi. You can see what we've got is just a couple little streams coming out of there right now. That's definitely is not acceptable. But as we go lower, it will eventually shut off at about 20 psi, is where the check valve will fully close. So now I'm going to slowly ramp up, back up to 75 psi over about a 10-second time frame. And you can see how the change in the mist takes place. And now we're back up to 75 psi. So that's a good demonstration of this mist nozzle Again, it's a 0.08 millimeter nozzle, probably the smallest one that's on the market right now, with what is called we'll call it a light gauge spring, which is basically supposed to be an 80 psi spring, but I've done a few modifications of it. Basically, I've made one of the holes in it a little larger so it'll operate at a little bit smaller or lower pressure. But that's it. Hope that's a good informative video for you. Thank you very much.